So if you're feeling that you can't manifest what you want, then no matter how much you try, it always seems to be a bit of a hit and miss. And maybe you've been on your spiritual journey and you've had a run of what feels like bad luck, and you've been trying to sort of get out of a situation or attract different results, but nothing seems to be working, then you might want to stick around, because I'm going to share what I have found around this whole manifesting situation, and particularly from a soul perspective, because with the readings in the Akashic Record, this is a very, very big thing that comes up for a soul. And when I see that, I can actually tell what's going on for the person. And then we can sort of break it down, really, because if they're not manifesting, then that's a very clear indication. And their soul wants them to know how we can really now focus and really start sort of manifesting what we want in our lives. So if this is you, you've stumbled across this and you're thinking, you know what, this is where I am now, or I'm getting a bit fed up that I can't manifest anything, then stick around, because we're going to now talk about some of the things behind manifestation. You know, you can feel so disempowered when you're not attracting what you want. In fact, sometimes we feel or get into that sort of state where we actually feel what we don't want is actually showing up. You know, because if we want something but the opposite happens or nothing's happening, you know, it does feel like rubbish. And then we sort of, you know, don't want to, but then it's easy then to compare ourselves and think, you know, that person's able to do that in their business, attract this, money, partner, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And then we're left feeling that, you know, nothing's really going on for us. But I kind of want to bring you back to really what I've noticed when I've been looking into the records for other people, and also for myself, because I had this issue. And the thing is that when we are in that frequency or in that sort of state where we're not getting what we want and it's not showing up in life, there's normally something else that's going on for us. You know, there's something that sort of takes our attention elsewhere. In other words, quite often we're not focused on either our goals, our plans, or what we want. And this is really key, because this is one of the things that can perhaps shift that for you. So the other little thing I also want to bring up is the fact that when we say we can only manifest a load of rubbish or the stuff we don't want, and I want to sort of let you know, well, you're still manifesting. It might not be what you want. And again, this is quite key. Once we realise we are doing it, but quite often we're doing it by default, or we're not even aware of it, or we haven't even got that focus, as I was mentioning, then that makes us really understand and start looking at some key factors when it comes to manifesting what you want. Now, one of them is being very clear on what you want to manifest. Now, I know you've probably think, oh, I am clear, and but are you clear? Because that's a very, very key point that I realised, and when I've spoken to countless other clients on this subject, because sometimes we know what we don't want. I could have written a book what I didn't want. But when I started asking myself, well, what do I want? What do I want? And it was very cloudy. I wasn't specific. It was all sort of muddled. And then when I thought, right, let's put pen to paper, I couldn't even write. It's like I thought, no, I don't want that. again, then I defaulted back to not what I didn't want, but really focusing on, well, what do I want? And this might be something that you hadn't been aware of, that maybe that's going on for you, that we're a little bit more focused, if you like, on what we don't want. Because I think that's very clear, isn't it? We don't want that, we don't want, let's put some words to this, we don't want a job that's not given us, enough money, we don't want a relationship where it's not mutual, all that kind of stuff. So then that brings us back to, well, how do we then put in place that focus and then what we do want? So, and this is really interesting, because when this comes up in the records and I can see that a person is not manifesting what they want, they're normally quite surprised. Well, how do you know that? And I think, well, your soul has brought this up. And then we go into what we have to do. It's really all about now having a little bit more a center, having a little bit more energy around the focus. So what that might look like is a goal or a plan. And once we've got that in place, we might not know in depth of plan A, B, C and how we're going to get there, but maybe it might start as a goal, right? Well, I want to earn 2,000 a month. I'm just plucking this out. And then once you've got that, then breaking down the steps of really how you're going to shift energy and create that. And I think this is where we can get a little bit annoyed, or I did, or a bit disempowered, because we're beginning to realise this does take effort. It takes a kind of effort where we need to change what we're doing, or we need to do an action that it's different from what we've done before. Now, I'll let you sort of sit with that a little bit. Where are you on that? Because I know that quite often I want change, I want to create something, but I'm doing exactly the same thing in order, for that to come into my reality. Well, I've got to actually do something a little bit different in order to manifest that. That saying, keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same stuff or the same results. So there is an element there that we have to have a bit of engine behind it, or a little bit more, right, well, this is what we got to do. And hence some people use vision boards, and some people plan their goals or plan what they're going to do. And I must admit, there is a level of planning, and having been disempowered and not manifesting what I want and didn't know what I want, I always find it very, very helpful, and I tend to do each week, where I sit down and state what it is that I want, do the planning and how I'm going to get that. So in other words, I might have to do something different, might need to be different marketing, it might be then I've got to do this, if it's for a business, or if it's for spiritual things or personal things, or it might be that you want to go on holiday. Then you might then need to commit to a payment plan of so many months in advance in order to make that happen. So can you see that sometimes we do have to do something to sort of kind of cement that in, to put that into our reality. So maybe you've tried that, maybe you've done that, and hence you've got a little bit of mixed results. But the reason why I thought it would be really nice to sort of talk about this and really share a little bit more behind it is because it's really beautiful. Because when I read for somebody in the Akashic Records, it's really incredible that there is no hit and miss in terms of the spirit realm when we are starting to implement change, or in other words, we start intending on what we want. And I want to really dive into that next. So this brings us to this little section that I found very helpful, is that when we start using the power of intention, or we start focusing our mind on whatever it is that we want, that's when multi-dimensional beings start hearing us. Now we know that there is so much around us sometimes that we are not even aware of. Our angels are with us, our guides are with us. But you know what? There's also beings that are here, that are around us, that whilst we are here, that will help us to create what we want. Now, if this scenario happens where I can see that someone is not manifesting, well, this immediately shows in their records. And the fact that it's come up, I know that that is something that their soul then needs to sort of make them a bit more conscious and aware of. And it really starts with intention. So we have to be really start stating really clearly what we want. Really start writing that down, putting that energy out there in order for these multidimensional beings to help us in order to create that. Now, I don't know about you, but I found that incredible, because when I started looking at the Akashic Records around 2013, and then really sort of did some training to sort of really help others and work in the Akashic Records in 2017, I just thought, this is incredible. And this is where things started to change for me, where I'd realise that we all can manifest. Some can manifest very quickly in the physical, and some we just need a bit more focus and help. But we have got the help there. So I want you to sort of just have that little shift in now in your awareness that you are being heard once you state what you want. And especially if you're feeling disempowered over it, or you're feeling really disappointed that things are not manifesting. You're on your spiritual journey, no matter how much you try, you've got all these good nuggets out there, but whatever you try, it's just not working. So it might mean that you start one thing at a time, and then you're gonna realize when you're focusing on that, on what you want, stating what you want, and feeling the energy shift behind what you want. Because sometimes we might want something, but we feel that dread, or like, oh, it's not gonna happen, because that energy does not help you from point A to a point B. So I normally help somebody to really start the process of being clear, and that might be for you too. So write down one thing that you desire, one thing that you want and manifest, and then look at how you feel about that, because this is all energy. It's all an energy exchange. And then look at that. And this was quite telling for some, and it's been telling, especially if you're having a bit of issue in there, because sometimes we state what we want and we don't believe it. And of course, then we think about the secret, you know, then we have to believe it, we have to put it into action, and then it will show up in our reality. And of course, there's truth in that, because if we don't believe it's going to happen, then guess what? You know, our wish is our command. It's not going to happen. So we just need to look at one thing that you want. And then that one thing, look at how you feel about that thing. Because there might be an energy behind it. Maybe you don't deserve it. Maybe you think it's out of your league. Maybe you feel that You're asking for it, but it's just not going to happen. So this is where we then start realizing there's a little bit more behind it. And we've got to start somewhere, haven't we? So this might be something that will just help you to shift that energy. Because sometimes when we're ingrained in a pattern and we're doing the same thing, just doing something different feels horrible. It doesn't feel nice at all. It feels uncomfortable. You know, there's a level of uncomfortability when we're used to doing the same thing, and maybe that could well be the issue. And once we're clear on what we want, and then maybe we can sort of think about, okay, so what are some of the things that I can shift or come to terms with? And then you might need to work on, if you don't feel worthy of it, then why don't you feel worthy of whatever it is that you want? But, you know, the words, you know, the vibration, and when we speak is really powerful. So keep stating that, what you want, whether that's out loud or within your own mind, because that's really powerful. And this is what I love about all of this and working in the records, and also with Yusui's Reiki courses as level 1, 2, and to master level and teacher, is that he knew how to meditate. But one thing I think is really powerful is that he also realized the power of the mind. You know, when we look at the universal law, all is mind, that we can then begin to understand that when we state something, and for Yusui, he put the framework into being very intentional of how we get into that frequency of meditation. And then he took it another step, not only how we get into meditation, but how we can heal ourselves. So again, this just kind of really underpins the fact that, you know, when we are stating or using the mind or setting the intention for something, that's powerful. So once we start stating what we want and setting that intention, you'll notice there will be an energy shift. And when that energy shift happens, that's when we start doing something different. And we've always got the support, not only of our guides and our angels, but these multidimensional beings. And it's really beautiful, because I have done readings where I have seen an indication that someone is now working through that, and that now that, and incidentally in the records, it's indicated through certain lights and certain colour lights, where I can tell when things have shifted. And that's incredible, because that's when a person will say, yes, this is what's happening. I feel different. I can now manifest. And I just think that's beautiful. So that might be something worth just remembering, that, you know, in order for us to be here in our physical bodies, where we feel quite limited, we kind of feel that we can't do this, we can't do that. Well, in actual fact, we are very powerful. We are creators. We might not be creating a whole lot of what we want, but we are creating it. So if we're creating what we don't want, then we can recreate what we do want. And once we start getting a handle of this, then we start to see that, wow, this does work. Not only have we got the support of those unseen, but, you know, we've really got the power within ourselves to, through our mind, to start intending what is going to show up in our reality. I hope that this has been of some use to help you, that if you feel that you can't get yourself around this whole manifestation. And maybe at the moment it's not what you want that you're bringing in, but we can change it. And it does mean a shift and doing something different so that we can vibrate in order to get and match what we want. But we've also got that help. So it just means for us, we need to have a plan. We need to be a little bit more focused. We need to state what we want. You know, and it might be helpful for you just to write it all out, get it all out, what you don't want. And that was one thing I had to do. And I could just write, I don't want this, I don't want that, blah, 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 and then compare it with what you do want. Because that's different. That's a different thought process, and you then shift into like, well, what do I want? And you might be finding that the pen is just sitting there a little bit, because that's different. Or you might be very clear, I want that. Then if that's the case, you're very, very clear, then it just might mean that we put a little bit more mind intention and just locking down more of what you want. Or maybe it just means that you do one thing at a time, bring that into your reality, and then move on to your next step. So it does take a level of effort on our part. It does mean that we've got to change what we're doing in order to bring that in, but it's definitely worth the effort. And when you start seeing the results, it's incredible. Now, some people use vision boards. I tend to sort of put on my phone just bullet points of what I want. And the minute that happens, I will go in and I tick it off. And I feel fantastic because that then creates an energy. You know, it's almost like there's a bit of a fire under the pot then. It's bubbling away, and that makes me think, if I've done that, then I can do that. And like we said, it might be some personal thing. It might be to go away on holiday. It might be to raise your income by a certain level. It might be to get into the job that you want. You know, whatever it is. Or it might be on a spiritual aspect of yourself. It doesn't really matter, whatever it is that we want. We're here in the flesh, and we're also spiritual beings, you know, having this whole physical life around us. So manifestation is something that we can get to. We might need to tweak around a little bit with it and sort of find out a little bit more of the energy of what it is that we want. And look at that, put an intention behind it, so then we can manifest. And whatever you do, you will always have that unseen helpers, those multidimensional beings that hear what you want and then help you to put that into your reality. So I hope this has helped. I hope this is going to really just sort of shift you, just get you going, and then start being a little bit more intentional and more focused, plans and goals of what you want. And if anything has we've talked about here resonated, then please do have a look at the website. Have a look at some of the services. You might want to look at the Akashic Records, an incredible reading session where we can really start sort of seeing a little bit more beyond the veil and what it is that we're here to do, and just connecting in with those spirit guides, because they're there. Sometimes we're not ready to sort of be so in contact with them, but they're always there. You might want to have a look at that. So do take care, and bye for now.